All right, so personally, I'm not a huge fan of APIs that require you to memoize the thing you pass into them because I don't think the pit of success is very wide here. It's really easy to just be like, oh, sweet, I'm going to use this use async thing and I'm going to pass this function. All right, that's pretty easy. And boom, we've just like sub-optimized ourselves. We have to document in the API that you want to make sure that this is memoized. And people could very easily skip over this. And it doesn't actually cause bugs. It's just suboptimal. So people could be making mistakes here and not know it until it gets into production and they're hitting their backend way too much. So I think it'd be way better if we redesign our API a little bit by providing a run function that we ourselves are responsible for memoizing, and then people can do their own use effect like this. So I'm going to copy and paste this right here. And then we're going to make this work. So now useAsync no longer accepts a callback, and instead it's just going to accept our initial state, and we'll get our state values here, and then we'll also get a run function, which we'll be able to call inside of our own use effect. So here we can say if there's no Pokemon, then don't call the run function. And if there is a Pokemon, then we'll call the run function, and we provide it a promise, which then the run function will handle and keep our status and error and our data up to date based on the status of the promise that we passed the run function. And because the run function is coming from useAsync, now the implementation detail of useAsync can ensure that the run function only changes when necessary, and we can add whatever other dependencies we need for when we want this side effect to be run. I think that's a much better API, and so that is what we're going to implement here. So to make that work, we're no longer accepting the async callback. We're just going to accept that initial state. And we're no longer going to be doing this use effect. Instead, we're going to make a function called run that is a use callback function so that it's memoized. And then this run function is going to accept a promise. And then what is it going to do? Well, I think it's going to do all the exact same things that this was doing. So let's just move that. And then we need to provide a dependency list here. Let's get rid of that. And wait a second, I'm not getting any weird underlines for this. And as it happens, we are using this dispatch, but that is coming from useReducer, and the ESLint plugin knows that this dispatch will never change. useReducer ensures that for us we'll never get a new dispatch function, even as these functions are re-rendering, and so we don't need to include dispatch in there. We can if we want to, but it's not necessary. The other thing that we're using in here is this promise, but we're accepting that as an argument, so that won't be a dependency that can change either. So our run function is solid. This will never change. So now all we need to do is return our state plus the run function. And sweet, we get our state and the run function. The run function is consistent over time because it is using use callback, and we have an empty dependency list here. And then where we're using it, we can do whatever we want to with this use effect. In fact, we could even make this run function get called inside of a click handler if we want to. So our useAsync hook is now a lot more powerful, and I would argue that the API is much simpler. And so let's save this, make sure that everything's working. We got Pikachu, we've got errors handling, and we got recovery of those errors. Things are looking awesome. So let's just do a quick review. Before, useAsync accepted a memoized callback function, and it had a use effect in here that had that async callback in the dependency list. We didn't really like that, and so instead, we forced the user of useAsync to call the run function when they want to have their asynchronous callback run. And we just pass them the promise that we get back from fetch Pokemon, and then the run function calls dispatch to get it pending. It adds a then handler onto the promise so that when it's successful, it can dispatch that it's resolved. And when there's an error, it can dispatch that it was rejected. So it can maintain all of that state for us, which is the real benefit of this useAsync custom hook. And all of that thanks to the beautiful React use callback.